सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
For the past many days, we've been so caught up and so distracted and so obsessed with our domestic politics. Also because something very important was going on. Very important elections were going on and results were coming in. Now that that is over, we can return our gaze to some really important and interesting developments to the west of our country. Now, usually when we say the west of our country, you might say, oh, Pakistan again. But no, in this case, it's not Pakistan. We are leapfrogging Pakistan. We are going beyond Pakistan and looking primarily at Iran, but also at Afghanistan. Afghanistan, like mentioned in dispatches. Because you know what? We are part of the same geopolitical landmass. Much as we believe increasingly that our gaze should be Indo-Pacific, which is to the south and the east, the fact is that when it comes to land, still our primary immediate threat comes from land. And also we have cultural linkages, we have population linkages. That's why, so what happens to our west is also very important. But before I get there, my periodic reminder to you, you have to top up that paid subscription for us. Without that, we can do nothing of this sort. In fact, at this point, I know that all of you appreciate our ground coverage, on-ground coverage, and I know that you know, and you also share our pride in the fact that we won the International Press Institute, that's a Vienna-based institute, award for journalism in India, and that is for our ground coverage of COVID. So we do ground coverage all the time, ground reporting, that's our strength and that's our USP. And that at a time when more and more larger media organizations are no longer doing it. One, to scrounge for money, and second, they think that they can satisfy their viewers, listeners, readers mainly through all this maramari and tutu meme that happens on their TV channels. In that environment, we are still investing in ground reporting. So the kind of ground reporting you've seen from the Hindi heartland from us, from our reporters, that is UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Haryana, Punjab, and so on and so forth. We now want to also take a lot of that to other parts of the country, particularly Maharashtra, Gujarat, but even more so a region that we Delhi-based medias, Delhi-walas tend to overlook. That is the South. So we want our reporters now traveling through the entire states of Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, so we can bring you the same granular level of coverage as we do from UP, Bihar, etc. So for that, we need resources and we need you to be large-hearted and generous. So once again, take a paid subscription, and if you have one, please top it up. This will all be put to very good effect. We will spend it very prudently and bring you back in return excellent, brilliant journalism that you will feel proud of. Now, having made my pitch, I get back to the issue of the day. That is Afghanistan, Iran. So Afghanistan, as I told you, only gets a mention in dispatches because something's happened there. They have carried out their first public execution since the Taliban took over. Now, when the Taliban took over, they made many promises. Taliban have changed, we are different. And there were many apologists who emerged, particularly on the side of the Western liberal left. Also, a lot of the Western liberal publications, think tanks, they began saying, no, Taliban have changed. So we know that Taliban so far, and it's been a long time now since they took over, they still haven't allowed women to go to school. That is, women to go to senior school, right? They still haven't kept their promise. They keep on saying a few more months, they haven't done it. So while they haven't kept their promise of allowing young women to go to school, they've also brought in a lot of the old medieval execution of Islamic jurisprudence, which increasingly now is found abhorrent even in Islamic countries. So public floggings, for example, have come back, right? Public floggings, beatings, all of them have come back. But now they've also carried out their first public execution since they took over. So this tells you are back to normal, which means the Taliban will be the Taliban. There is no such thing as a Taliban light or new improved Taliban or diet Taliban. Taliban are the Taliban, and Taliban remain in power because they are the way they are, because they draw their power from conservative Islam or religious conservatism. You can choose any of the expressions that you prefer. So this man who's been executed, he was convicted for a murder, for killing somebody with a knife, stabbing somebody to death in 2017. That is before the Taliban had taken over formally, by the way, in the Farah province of Afghanistan. Now he was given this death sentence, execution not by a firing squad, but execution by the father of the man he had killed. So the father of the man he had killed came up. His rifle had 3 bullets, so he fired 3 bullets into this guy, and this guy died in front of a large audience, which I presume was cheering, although we don't have any pictures yet. And who were present in the audience? In the audience was the acting, all ministers are acting in the Taliban government, so I will now drop acting with the rest, take acting as read. So Interim Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani, he of the op-ed in New York Times fame, right? And he of the op-ed in New York Times fame, who said in that op-ed that we have changed. Now he was there to witness this public execution of a convict, murder convict, by the victim's father, right? Public spectacle. He was there, acting Deputy Prime Minister Abdul Ghani Baradar, Maulana Baradar. He was there. Chief Justice of Afghanistan was also present. Great justice, no? You see justice being delivered in kind, such as it is. So he was present. Finance Minister, Education Minister, they were all there. And this order had been authorized by none else than Hibatullah Akhundzada, who is the supreme spiritual leader of the Taliban. He lives in Kandahar. He does not have executive office, but he's the boss of all his surveys. And see what's happened in Afghanistan meanwhile. So there's also a story in The Economist. I will show you a screenshot only. Now that story tells you, it shows you Gallup data, Gallup poll data on how women's status has changed in Afghanistan after the Taliban took over. And so see the 2 important data points. It's a comparison between 2016 and now. And the comparison tells you that if you ask the women, they say that in 2016, on a scale of 10, they saw freedom for women for themselves at 4.5. So not great, but still 4.5. Today they see it as how much? As 1. This is as bad as things look for Afghanistan's women now under the Taliban. Men surveyed and asked the same question. Look at what's your view of freedoms for your women between 2016 and now. 2016 they said 4.5. That is the same as the women said. Now they say 1.5. So just a little bit better, or little bit less worse. Again, are women treated with respect and dignity? First one was freedoms. Second, are women treated with respect and dignity? The men in 2016 said yes. 65% said yes. Today, half of that say yes. That is 33%. But look at the women. In 2016, 52% said yes, we are treated with dignity. Today, only 11% say that. So you can see that things have gone really bad. Now, this is happening. The reason we read Afghanistan and Iran together, in fact, is simply because the regimes in both the countries, Islamic regimes or Islamist regimes in both the countries, they have many similarities and many differences. So we can keep talking about that as we go ahead. But they both regimes draw their power from their own convenient interpretation of conservative Islam. So in Afghanistan, you've seen how the Taliban have done it. In Iran, on the other hand, the regime has been in trouble. The regime has been in trouble because Iran's women have been protesting over the hijab ban. And you've seen that play out on your TV screens day after day after day now since September. And it's quite evident the women are not giving up in Iran. And in fact, men are also joining in. And that protest is becoming bigger than just a hijab protest. So those protesters are now demanding a change in the regime. They demand the ouster of the Islamic regime. In that situation, while the regime has been saying that, look, we are listening to you, you have concerns, we'll do something about it, and they've made a few pretenses. They said, for example, that the morality police, Islamic morality police, is being disbanded. Now, whether it's been disbanded or not in effect, that we'll just talk about in a minute, but at least they have said that this has been disbanded and that talk to us, we will deal with you in a more humane manner, etc., because they've been under pressure. Now, if there were any expectations that this pressure will lead to a conduct change, that exactly the opposite has happened. So the Iranians have just now handed out their first death sentence to a protester involved in these processions and protests. So this protester has been given the death sentence. The allegation against him is that he was setting fire to a government building. But see also how the court order has editorialized it. Court order has called him, and I quote from the court order, an enemy of God and a corruption on earth. So the man is also a corruption on earth and an enemy of God. Now, enemy of God, I thought God is powerful enough to punish their own enemies, but nevertheless, he's been handed over a death sentence for being an enemy of God and corruption on earth. And where have we seen it? This is on the Iranian judiciary's website called Mizan Online. Now, besides this, another Tehran court, this death sentence has been handed out by a Tehran court. Another Tehran court has handed out a whole bunch of 5-year jail sentences to many other protesters, and that is in a way responding to a call by the Iranian lawmakers. So while these protests were going on, 272 out of 279 of Iranian lawmakers had said that they should be, and again I'm quoting from that resolution, an eye for an eye treatment of these protesters, and protesters should be given death sentences. So this is the first one. In fact, that resolution by Iranian parliamentarians had said that there should be an eye for eye treatment for those who, I quote, those who have harmed people's lives and property with bladed weapons and firearms. So that's just begun to happen now. Iran, in fact, if you look at all the global human rights organizations, Iran carries out more executions than any country in the world except China. China, I don't think anybody can beat because Chinese are in a league by themselves, as in many other areas also. Now, who's the guy who said that Iranians are relenting, they're calming down? That was Mohammad Javad Montazeri. Mohammad Javad Montazeri is Attorney General of Iran. Although the morality police doesn't report to him, Iranian police also doesn't report to him, morality police would be controlled by the Iranian police. So he has said that, look, this morality police has been abolished by the same authorities that had installed it. That is the Iranian police. But at the same time, all the critics of the regime said this isn't abolition, this is just renaming it. So there is one Iranian origin journalist based in Washington who I know well and who I take very seriously, who I converse with sometimes. In fact, I tried unsuccessfully as yet to get her to write for The Print, Negar Mortazavi. She tweeted, and her tweet is important to read, and I am sharing it with you on my screen. She said there are 3 things. Number 1, morality police has been rebranded as public safety police for a while, so nothing new has happened. This is just propaganda. Number 2, that mandatory hijab law has not changed. It is still on the books. And number 3, the same hijab rules and Islamist rules are being enforced in other ways. For example, warning messages, by delivering warning messages, through fines, through business closure, and also through celebrity arrest. So if a famous person is arrested and punished, like that climber, for defying the hijab ban, that becomes a kind of lesson for everybody else. So there is a lot of skepticism about what's happened, and the skepticism is justified. So Iran's foreign minister, Hussein Amir Abdullahian, he has said in Belgrade that, quote unquote, in Iran, everything is moving forward well in framework of democracy and freedom. Now, Montazeri, the Attorney General, he's also said that, look, this is gone, morality police is gone. Now judiciary will still enforce restrictions on social behavior as mandated. And what are these restrictions in Iran? Women are supposed to wear long, loose clothing and tie their hair in a headscarf. And once again, if morality police doesn't do it, the Basij militia can do it. What is the Basij militia? That's another fascinating story. Basij militia is one of the five organizations, or one of the five mostly armed organizations under Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is controlled directly by the supreme leader, by the Ayatollah himself. So Basij actually means the mobilization. The full name of Basij is Sazman-e Basij Mustazafin, which means the organization of mobilization of the oppressed peoples. What they do is, they also have extra constitutional powers, enormous powers, and they also enforce these restrictions. So just the renaming of the morality police does not mean anything. So it's not as if Iran is making any fundamental changes or improvements or reforms in its conduct. Now the interesting thing about Iran is an authoritarian country, but not a totalitarian one. It has totalitarian tendencies. Now it's a little bit complicated for me to explain it, but I will try to simplify it as much as possible. So the simplest way in which I can state it is that Iran is a country which is authoritarian. Its 1979 constitution actually sets up an authoritarian theocracy. But it isn't like any other authoritarian system, say General Musharraf's rule in Pakistan. That's authoritarian because within that it allows a lot of differences of opinion. It might even allow some election, etc., etc. So to that extent, Islam is an authoritarian. To that extent, Iran is an authoritarian system. Totalitarian is when the ruler is a dictator, as in the authoritarian system, but also then tries to control everything in your lives, including what happens in your family lives, laws of marriage, how many children you will have, what will you wear, what will you eat, etc., etc. That's a totalitarian society. So today you would say a classical totalitarian society would be, say, China. North Korea, although we don't know enough about North Korea, even to say that much, but China is close to totalitarian. Iran is designed as a theocratic, authoritarian state, but it has a ideological bent of totalitarianism. So that is why Iran becomes such a fascinating and such a confusing place. And that is the reason in Iran you can also find sometimes opposition leaders. So there is also an MP, his name is Jalal Rashid Kuchi, who's spoken out sort of in favor of these women and who has said this is a good decision but this is too late. So that's where you can see that this dress code for women is an ideological pillar of the Islamic regime in Iran. It is central to the identity of the clerical establishment, which in fact has been given a new life, a new energy by an ultra-conservative president. So Ibrahim Raisi was elected in the last election. In fact, we had an entire episode of Cut The Clutter on that. I will share a link with you. You can watch that. So it was after the last election when an ultra-conservative was chosen, also with the blessings of the Ayatollah. And as we said in that earlier episode of Cut The Clutter, the Ayatollah and the clergy and the powers that be made sure that any other credible challengers, particularly those who were less conservative, were not even allowed to contest. They were disqualified or ejected or evicted on one ground or the other. So Mr. Ibrahim Raisi won, and we are seeing some consequences. Because you know what? As we told you, Iran is not a perfect dictatorship. It is not a totalitarian state. There is still a strong democratic urge in Iran. Under their authoritarian system, they also allow elections. So in elections, candidates, parties can have different views, different policies, but all conforming to the same Islamic ideology, which is set by the Maulvis or the Ayatollahs in Qom, right? But within that, there is a lot of debate. At the same time, there's a lot of protest as well. So if you want to see Iran, modern Iran, the post-Shah, post-revolution Iran, which means the post-1979 constitution Iran, there were big protests in 2017-18, even bigger protests in 2019-20. In January 2020, Soleimani, the number 2 person, basically the de facto boss of IRGC, was killed by the CIA, by the Americans. Near Baghdad, Iranians launched many retaliatory attacks on Baghdad, etc. And it was in that commotion that they mistakenly shot down, one of their missiles shot down a Ukrainian Airlines flight, Flight 752, killing all passengers near Tehran. In the wake of that, there were again protests. So you can see that in that society, something is bubbling and it always needs an excuse to come out. So what we are seeing right now are among the longer lasting protests. So Iranians might pretend that they are softening, they are abolishing this morality police, but then this death sentence tells you that their intentions have not changed at all.